have Gayathri Radhakrishnan here in the Experience Center as we wrap up an official side event of TechCrunch Disrupt, talking about data and AI. Gayathri, otherwise known as G, you are an investor for Hitachi Ventures, is that right?
That is correct.
So tell us about your approach to investing, how you think about, we're talking about data and AI today, but just in general, investing in enterprise startups.
To me, investing in any startup, it starts with the team. Who am I investing in, right? And the founders, essentially. It then builds on what is the problem they're solving and why is this problem worth solving? And then I look at how are they capable of solving this? What is the moat that they have? What is the unique value and so on? But it always, to me, starts with a team. And I'll give you a quick sort of my thought process on why that is the case. You never know what life's going to throw at you. And I know it sounds like a philosophical statement, but that statement is more true when it comes to a startup founder's life. Who could tell there was going to be COVID, right? Who could tell when a recession happens? There are a lot of things that we want to feel like we are in control of, but in reality, we may not be. And external factors have a big role to play. And so I want to see how the team is capable of adapting to what the market conditions are and then still making the best of that opportunity and going forward. And so to me, the team is a critical component in terms of evaluating who I invest in.
Makes a lot of sense. So as you go from team to looking at markets or opportunities and bets that sort of make sense because you're looking for large market opportunities, what are some of the areas that you're really focused on right now?
So right now at Hitachi Ventures, we have a broad sort of focus around digital transformation. So we are looking at technologies that enable digital transformation. So right now that is, guess it, AI ML, right? So, or maybe add generative AI to it. So that's kind of one of the big areas of focus. So we are looking at infrastructure around, there was in the side event that we just talked about, there was conversation around compute shortage, right? So understanding how can we make that element better? How can we alleviate that problem? How can we look at that infrastructure stack from a software perspective in addition to just the hardware? How can we look at the application layer that sits on top of the infrastructure software? So the end-to-end stack is kind of what we look at as well.
Are there any exciting portfolio companies or opportunities you'd like to share with the audience?
Quite a few. One of the things about being an investor is I feel like when I get that question, it's always like, who's your favorite child? Right? But the good news is I joined Hitachi Ventures just 6 months ago. So I've made one investment and I'm still in love with that investment. So I'll talk about that. I invested in a company called Arcus that's in the networking stack. I'm very excited about that investment because I think at the end of the day, we talk about compute shortage and so on, but all of that is enabled by the underlying networking infrastructure, right? So when there's massive volumes of data that's being used to either build models or train your models and so on, where is that data sitting? Is it sitting, in your data center? Is it sitting in one system? Does it even have to traverse the data center? So I believe that networking is going to play a big role in that sort of aspect. So I'm very excited about the role Arcus can play in this infrastructure stack.
Well, that's interesting. So there's a big focus on that compute layer. What are some of the opportunities and threats that you see as there's more and more load on that infrastructure stack?
Prior to Hitachi, I was at Micron, which is a memory company. So I talked about networking and I talked about sort of, compute infrastructure, and Hitachi also has a storage and systems business. So I think going forward, the storage, memory, all of those are going to be an important aspect. Again, tying back to that data in the AI theme. And why is that? Because one of the things that's not really talked about is, while everyone talks about compute and sort of compute capacity and so on, a lot of the GPU is not fully utilized. So efficiency of utilization of GPUs are not great. And that's because the GPU has to sit and wait for the data to come to it so it can actually do the compute. So there's idle time, right? So if you're talking about a GPU spending, like, even if it's 30% of its time, if it's sitting idle, that's an expensive sort of resource that's not doing anything. So how do you make it more efficient? And so that's where I think the storage and memory and the network king components come in, because imagine if I put something, let's say ChatGPT, I put a question and I can't sit there waiting for it. We've been trained to receive responses pretty quickly, right? So latency becomes super important. But this is a low cost situation. Worst case, you sat for a few seconds. But if you're talking about, say, a surgery, where you're doing maybe remote assistance, or you're leveraging video technology or something like that, those require super low latency, high precision responses. So how do you enable those kind of real-time use cases by making sure that your infrastructure can support you, right? And that's where the software layer comes into play, because not a lot of application developers are going to think about what is the underlying infrastructure. They're going to think about the performance of the application, and they're going to expect that the infrastructure will deliver what they're looking for. But they may not know how best to utilize that. So that's where kind of the infrastructure software and the middleware comes into play to make the application software run seamlessly and utilize those infrastructure resources more efficiently as well.
So it sounds like there's an opportunity to leverage software to get more out of the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
So tonight was data and AI. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think data and AI is a very interesting talk. I mean, big data has been around for a while. And now when you think about these larger and larger models being built with billions of parameters, they're all being trained on tons of data. And there is also that movement towards few-shot learning or zero-shot learning. The idea that you don't need those large data sets to train these models as well. So I'm very eager to see how that movement will develop, because our human brain doesn't use, a lot of power to operate. I think it uses about like 20 watts of power or something like that. It's one of the most efficient, engines, so to speak, in our human body. So I'm very curious to see how, and we don't train on tons of data. I mean, a kid, after seeing a few cars, can say, oh, that's a car or a cat, or, has the ability, right? A child has the ability to do feature recognition and object recognition. They have more general sort of perception, general knowledge. It's not just specifically tied to a use case or something like that. So I would like to see these models getting more efficient, less power consuming, less resource intensive, and be able to work off of smaller amounts of data. And then I think there'll be those specialized models that are more well suited for a particular use case, where they can be much more deeper in that domain. That's what I'm very eager to see in the data and AI space.
Well, it sounds like you're very passionate. I'm excited about what you're talking about. Some of these themes are near and dear to our heart here at NTT. Certainly making compute the same kilowatt per hour as the brain. That sounds pretty good. I have one last question for you, G, which is something that you're very passionate about, I understand, as female founders.
I am. I wonder why. No, I think that the world is made up of, a diverse set of population. And I feel like we talk about STEM in school and so on. I want more and more young girls to see powerful role models, and it starts with investing in companies that are women-led, so they have that role model that they can look up to. So that's one of my personal passions and pet peeves, and I believe that it's possible. I think there are enough female founders out there who are doing groundbreaking stuff, and I would love to have the opportunity to invest in them.
Well, if there are any female founders in your space, how do they reach you? Do they go to the Hitachi Ventures website? What's the best way?
They can ping me directly on LinkedIn.
Oh,
I'm happy
perfect.
happy to take calls or happy to assist them as well.
Great to know. Lovely to have you in, G. It's been a great chat.
Thank you, Maggie. Thanks for having me.